Greetings, I'm Mark Riley, and welcome to the Washington Tattoo Podcast, where the world's musical traditions come to life. The Washington Tattoo is an international music and arts festival coming to the Washington, D.C. metro area. Our podcast explores the lives and stories of world-renowned musicians, dancers, producers, choreographers, artists, educators, arts advocates, and those who serve our cultural communities at large. For more information and donations, find us at www.thewashingtontattoo.com. Now please enjoy this episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast, sharing the power of the arts, one story at a time.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast. We're starting a new format, actually. I have a co-host, Stuart Warmington. Thank you, Stu. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, great. And nice to be here and nice to get cracking on with some podcasts. Perfect.
Awesome. Stu is a great friend, and I think you'll learn so much about his background being a Royal Marine and working with the British Drum Company and just being a musical ambassador around the world. So it's a lot of fun for me to have him on these podcasts with us. But for this podcast, really special guest, Yeoman Darren Hardy, and who was a fifer. He was a sergeant major. He was a sergeant. He was all of these amazing things with the British Army, Coldstream Guards, Honorable Artillery Company. But an interesting thing was, and Stu and I were just chatting about this, he lives in the Tower of London. I don't know how comfortable as an American I would be living in the Tower of London. It kind of has a little bit of a interesting past, but I don't know. So Stu, I mean, that's what they do though, right? These guys live in the tower,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, they can live in the Tower of London. I was fortunate to go down to Darren. Invited me back about a couple of months ago down to the Tower of London, see the ceremony of the keys, go into the keys bar. They have their own bar, and then have a look around his house, which is, it's inside the actual tower itself, and just outside of it was where the moat would have been, and it's incredible. You've got this own community of warders that live inside the tower, and when they do the ceremony of the keys, which closes the whole place down at 12 o'clock, after 12 o'clock, they can't go out. They are locked in themselves. So, yeah. It's great living in the tower, but if you want to go out after 12 o'clock at midnight, you've got no chance. But it's got a really close community vibe to it, and those who have kids who also live there, their playground is outside the Crown Jewels. They take the scooters up and down, and it's just an incredible place to live in. Going on later on in life, they're going to find this such an amazing thing that they've done at a young age.
Yeah, and I know these guys, I mean, they're all military or former military, things like that, but having children around the Crown Jewels, I'm sure there have been mischievous children who have tried to figure out how to get their hands on some jewels.
I bet that. And it's great that, Darren comes from a musical background, but there's also other people there within the Yeoman Warders. It is with a musical background. You've got people there from the RAF. You've even got a senior drum major there from the household division. So, they spent a whole career in music, and now they've changed that around in places they used to play at being in the military, and now they're basically teaching history to tourists and everybody else who wants to come and see the historical palaces.
Well, that's incredible. And I mean, just, one last thing before we hop into the interview. I mean, the idea of what was called a beef eater. In the U.S., we called them beef eaters. That's what we thought. They wore these uniforms. They had this very special, unique hat. And to find out there's really no such thing as a beef eater other than the gin, I thought was really kind of interesting.
Do you know, when we asked that question, I was absolutely shocked because I had no idea. Because obviously I've always called them a beef eater because, well, that's what they've always been called. So, to find out that actually it doesn't exist is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Well, folks, you're really going to enjoy this episode. I mean, you're seeing an incredibly historic location, and the description of the tower through the eyes of a musician is really powerful. So you'll enjoy it. Stu and I will ask Darren some questions, and folks, have a great day and enjoy the podcast.
Greetings again, everyone. We just wanted to take a second to say thank you to Seif Studios for their creative media. If you want to find out more about Seif Studios, look them up on www.seifstudios.com. We'd also like to say thank you to our educational partner, ProLogix Percussion, American-made drum pads. They're doing a special discount code for our listeners today. So if you go to www.prologixpercussion.com and type in TWT20, you will receive 20% off your entire order. So Thank you very much for tuning in today, and please check out our supporters.
Excellent. So this morning or this afternoon, based on where you are in the world, we have Darren Hardy, a yeoman at the Tower of London. This is super exciting for the Washington Tattoo podcast. So Darren, just want to take a second to say thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome, Mark. It's really good to be here.
Excellent. So I think a lot of folks are very interested in what your duties are and the things that you've done to get into the position that you're in now. But let's just start at the very, very beginning. So what would you say, how did you get into music? What is your start in your story?
Well, I started, my instrument's flute. I started playing at the age of 14. And then at the age of 15, there was an advert in the local newspaper for a band which was the 6th Battalion, Royal Regiment and Northumbrian Fusiliers. At that time, they were called the Territorial Army, and now they're called the Army Reserves. So I went along, my father took me along to a place called Hutton Terrace Drill Hall. You know, I was only about 5'2", 15 years old, you know, very green. And he took me along, and then I was hooked, you know. So, and I served as a reservist. I served for about 10 years initially. In those days, you could join at 15, by the way, you know, so it was a great education in music. During which time I was at college. I trained as a musical instrument maker and repairer in Newark. Then after that training, I got a job in London where I was repairing and restoring flutes. During that time, I was on attachment to another reserve unit called the Honourable Artillery Company in their band. And then in about 1995, I decided that I wanted to go full-time with military music. I really missed it. So I pushed for an audition with a band of the Coldstream Guards, which was, I thought, I'm going to start at the top, you know, let's try my best. I managed to get an audition, passed the audition, and I got to the band 1st of July, 1996. Served 23 years with the band of the Coldstream Guards, and left the band of the Coldstream Guards April 2019. On the next day, I transferred into the band of the Honourable Artillery Company, where I'm still to this day playing as a flautist. So that's in a nutshell, that's my musical story so far, Mark.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I love the fact that you're saying so far. That means there's still more to come.
Oh, yes, I was adamant. I didn't want to give up the most constant thing in my life, which is music. The thing that's given me the most out of my life, you know, it's got me to where I am today. So, yeah.
Well, excellent. So if we were to go back into the very beginning and talk about the inspiration of starting to take it seriously, could you kind of talk about who that person would have been and what happened to make you really take the next step and take it seriously?
Well, initially when I first started playing, like every, you know, Stuart will tell you, most young lads up where we're from in the northeast of England, near Newcastle, we all want to be footballers. You know, you call it soccer, footballers. And I used to kick my football up the bank, up the street, and the ball would roll down. And there was a man who lived in the house just across the road called Mr. Wilkinson, and he played flute, and I could hear him playing the flute, you know, as I kicked the ball up and down. So I spoke to my mother, my mum, about this, and they eventually decided to get me a flute for Christmas. And Mr. Wilkinson gave me my first lesson. And after that, I was completely hooked. I was addicted. So football went to one side, flute came out, and it all just went on from there, to be honest. It was just, that was my world, you know, playing and practicing. I couldn't get enough. It was fantastic.
I think it's very interesting because a lot of us, when we're young children, always have kind of this competing school or competing idea of music or sports or something like that. I was the same with baseball, where I was 14, 15 years old, and it was choosing one of the other, baseball or drumming. And I think there was a lot that can be said about the discipline from practicing, maybe from both at that time, where when you take the idea of discipline of I have to practice, I have to practice, I have to practice, and then you start to transfer that into the musical world, you start to recognize who is willing to put the time in and who is not willing to put the time in. So I think that's very interesting. And I mean, I think, so Stu, I mean, you also had some interest in this area with cadet bands and things of that. Can you talk about a little bit of your relationship with Darren?
Yeah, so strange enough, my father was the drum major at the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. So Darren was in obviously before I was, and then same thing. When I was 15, I joined the Corps of Drums, which was obviously part of the band. And, you know, I served a little bit with Darren. Darren was even seconded to the Corps of Drums when we did a tour of Gibraltar. So Darren was on bass drum for a nice little foreign trip for a couple of weeks away, which was great. And then over the course of, you know, the next 35 years, I just seem to have shared the stage with him, dotted around different parts of the UK, different parts of the world. And it's just nice that, you know, we started off in the same place. And, you know, at one point we'd nearly finished on the same gig pretty much, which is great. And obviously, as you know, as we look back at it, you know, we've all shared the same stage together back in the Sydney Tattoo back in 2010. So it's, you know, it's amazing that we've come a full circle and we're here, what, 11 years later, whatever it is. It's incredible.
I can't actually believe that we start putting all of the stories together and how many times. I mean, I think we've all ran across each other's paths at least a handful of times over our careers. And when you start to think about staying engaged and staying a part of it, I think is probably the most powerful idea, because when you retire, a lot of people say, I'm going to hang up the uniform. Maybe I'll be around a little bit, but to still stay engaged and to still serve, I think says a lot. So my hat's off to both of you gentlemen. And to dive into an interesting question I have is that youth bands and cadet bands, I think, are something I'm very passionate about on the American side of the house. Is that something, do we see that still being a large activity in the UK?
I'd say it is. Obviously, COVID's had a massive effect on it. You know, once COVID kicked in and there was a lot of lockdown, the kids then didn't want to go back. They'd spent too long, you know, playing on the Xboxes, and it was hard then for them to get back into the swing of things. But then you've got some bands like the Brentwood Imperial Youth Band. They've just grew from strength to strength. They've got like over 100 members in, even after COVID. They've lost a few people to university, but they're still growing strong. So, you know, I think they'll always be there, whether it's in youth band organizations or cadets. It's, you know, the foundation's there. And if you want to join the military, that's the first place, you know, that's your starting block. And that just generally, it's like a feeder school type of thing to go into the service. Would you agree, Darren?
Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously we took a completely different route. You know, we joined the reserves, you know, but I don't know if you agree, Stuart. I think there's a lot more opportunity for musicians now, for young musicians with these bands, especially in London. You know, the British Legion and the Brentwood Imperial, as you said, you know, very, very good bands. But yeah, it's, you know, it's getting stronger and stronger, and it's a great education as well. You know, it's fantastic training.
I mean, obviously from when we joined up, there's now social media, which then just opens up so many avenues of, you know, the experience and also the education of what is out there. You know, when I was young, like, there was just a few bands here and there, but actually now I've got older and learned about it, they were absolutely everywhere. And, you know, I had no idea, but now it's a little bit easier to find these things out prior to you joining.
Yeah, there were certain educational authorities around the Northeast which were better than others. I seem to remember for the music side, sort of wind bands, symphonic wind bands and orchestras, Washington, you know, where Sunderland, that was, you know, that was quite good around there. Gateshead, where we were from, there's, you know, there wasn't as much, but there's a huge improvement, I think, in the arts with sort of opportunities now. But like you say, social media it's really taken off, because if you didn't know, you didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
That was it. You had no, you just couldn't get to these places. Yeah.
It's interesting because in the United States, we have the Fife and Drums, and it's a very community-based music ensembles, a lot of it in the Northeast with New York and Connecticut. And during COVID, you definitely saw the people who said, hey, I was almost looking for an opportunity to kind of step away. And other folks said, well, no, I'm going to take it even more seriously. So some of the groups have kind of gone away, and some of the groups have really expanded because the groups that went away, the people who were really serious moved over to another organization. And I think that's interesting for the quality point of view, because now maybe there are less groups, but now the quality actually is a little bit stronger. So I'm interested to see where it goes. But I mean, I want to kind of talk a second about the Honorable Artillery Company, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Because there is the brother organization in Massachusetts that's the Ancient Honorable Artillery Company. And I was aware of this group. I didn't know all of the history behind it, but it was really incredible to go to the Mountbatten Festival and take a backstage kind of tour of the barracks area and the mess in London a few years ago. And so can you talk a little bit about the history of the Honorable Artillery Company?
Well, the Honorable Artillery Company, they've never been sort of full-time regular. They've always been reserve, but they are the oldest regiment in this country, probably not one in the world. They were formed in 1537. Sorry, 1537. They were formed, and they were artillery. They were archers originally, so they were formed by King Henry VIII. Most people have heard him. Very nice fella. And they've gone on ever since. So there are various companies within the Honourable Artillery Company, but these, when it comes to the sort of fifing and drumming, you have the Corps of Drums, so they have strong links with the Grenadier Guards, and you also have the Company of Pikemen and Musketeers, who are the the ceremonial bodyguard for the Lord Mayor of London, and they play basic fifes and field drums. And the uniform they wear is from the Civil War here, from about 1650 in this country, and they wear exactly the same uniforms. They play the same music, and the drill is the same from the drill manual from about 1649. And having paraded with them a couple of times, it takes a bit of getting your head around, but we have a band today. So we have the Lord Mayor's Bodyguard, they're called Ye Music, have the Corps of Drums, and obviously we have the regimental band of the Honourable Artillery Company. So they're going from strength to strength. Yeah, that's
amazing. And I've heard that the parade grounds in the middle of London is worth a quite large sum of money.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they've got a rugby pitch and a couple of cricket pitches in the middle of the city. You're not going to get that anywhere else, That's pretty special.
Well, and so in that barracks that's there, the history of that, I'm sure, is going all the way back to really when London becomes a real major metropolitan area, I would imagine.
It's medieval, it's, literally fields. Before the city was set up. It just goes, the history there is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the Guards bands and its connection as well. And so there are 5 Guards bands that exist that do the changing of the guard. Could you talk a little bit about just an overview of the history of maybe the Guards bands?
So the Guards are part of what you call the household division, and they are the personal bodyguard to the sovereign, the troops of the royal household. Now, we have 5 foot guards regiments. We have the Grenadiers, the Coldstream, the Welsh Guards, the Scots, and the Irish. Some are older than others, so a lot of them sort of came about after the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, after the revolution. But if I talk about the Coldstream Guards, so we're classed as the 2nd Regiment of Foot, which we hate because our motto is second to none. And in the 1st Foot Guards are the Grenadier Guards. The reason we dislike that is the fact that we were raised in 1650 by Oliver Cromwell. So we're the bad boys of the revolution because we actually fought against the king. The Grenadiers were raised in 1656. They were raised in Bruges in Belgium, because that's where King Charles II was in exile. And then you had the Scots Fusiliers, who were actually raised in about 1642, who are older still. but they were disbanded because of the revolution. And they're the 3rd Regiment of Foot Guards. And then, of course, we have the Irish Guards. They were raised in the 19th century, and the Welsh Guards, which I think was 1916. So there's the basic history. So you have the five Foot Guards regiments, and the regimental bands and the corps drums represent those regiments. Now, as for our main duties, our duties are public duties. That's in support of the state and the royal family. So if I was to say what our bread and butter is changing the guard at Buckingham Palace, which is something which has gone on since about the same King Charles II. Well, the change in the guard was at Horse Guards, and then when the royal family moved to St James's Palace, that's when they'd have changing of the guard there. Yeah, there's a minefield of actual history, and I'm probably going to take up all of your podcast if I keep on carrying on.
I love it. So, I mean, Stu, I'd love to get your perspective on this as well, because the Royal Marines and the Guards bands do certain things together, but there are strictly things that are Army and there are strictly things that are Marines. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the drill's different. That's one of the big aspects. Counter marching, one will go one way, one will go the other way. So when we get to mass bands, we've got to decide who's doing that, who's the senior drum major. Generally, it's the senior service, which is the Navy, but sometimes, depending on the event, that's not the case. So it's there's a bit of a bun fight to begin with until everybody marks the territory. And then after that, we just, you just go whatever one way or the other. You just get on and do it. At the end of the day, it's just about getting the bigger performance out. But yeah, we work on numerous occasions. What they've started doing on the Royal Festival of Remembrance, or the Royal British Legion Festival of Remembrance, they've started doing a tri-service opening, which came in about 4 years ago. So that's all 3 bands. You've got the RAF, you've got the generally it's a Guards band and the Royal Marines, and we just work together. So the drill, even halting is different. The Royal Marines don't mark time, the Guards do, and the RAF do. So there's these little things that probably you wouldn't even think about until you get them together. And then well, why have you stopped marching? Well, we don't mark time. Well, they are. Well, we need to do something about it. So there's it does come with a lot of issues, but generally it's all sorted out in a matter of time.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also this as well, I mean, I'd love to hop into some uniform differences, because each of the Guards bands are distinctive based on the buttons. Is that correct?
So again, Mark, it goes down to the seniority of that regiment. So Grenadiers, because they were the first Guards, so in support of the monarch at the time, their buttons are continuous. Coldstream Guards, even though we hate it, 2nd Regiment of Foot are grouped in 2s. The Scots Guards are in 3s, Irish Guards 4s, Welsh Guards in 5s. And there's also on the collars, you can distinguish which regiment it is. So not just the buttons, the collars. Coldstream have the Garter Star, Grenadiers have a grenade, Scots Guards have the Order of the Thistle, Irish Guards have the Order of St. Patrick, and the Welsh Guards have the leek, the root vegetable. And there's also different distinctions with a plume in the bearskin caps. So that's subtle differences, yeah, but you can. But from a distance, it's very, very difficult to tell who's who. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's on purpose. And with the bearskin hat, do you know what the tradition is with the bearskin hat?
Well, it's actually a battle honor. Okay. It's from the Battle of Waterloo, So when so basically again the First Guards defeated the Grenadiers of Napoleon Bonaparte's Imperial Guard. They wore those bearskin caps and they took it as a trophy of war. So it's a trophy of war. After which they were given the title of Grenadiers, and they were allowed to wear the bearskin cap as an order of headdress. And then later on, probably about 1837. The other Guards regiments followed suit. So it's a battle honor. That's why they wear it. Yeah.
And I mean, I would imagine that when the world sees the stage at Buckingham Palace and they see the changing of the Guard, this is one of the most inspiring things for people to see. It looks perfect. The troops are always immaculately dressed. The uniform inspection that I know that takes place prior to is very, very extensive. But I would imagine that a lot of kids that see this are inspired to want to become a guard. Is that something that, did you see a changing of the guard when you were younger? I mean, is that something that was part of your upbringing as a child?
Well, no, I never actually saw, just because it's a London-based thing, and obviously from the northeast of England. But you know, the Guards were always on TV. You see any sort of major state ceremonial event in London, and it's the Guards, you know. But it's a fabulous thing to participate in. I always used to describe it to some of the new musicians. You know, it's probably one of the best stages in the West End. And if you were a musician or a dancer, you couldn't play or you couldn't get your choreography sorted out, well, you wouldn't have a job. So, you know, get to grips with the drill and the music. That's how I used to describe it. So, yeah. But I think I did about just short of 1,800 guard mounts when I was in the Coldstream. Yeah, I sat and worked it out. I was just about getting the hang of it before I left.
I love it. In the States, we have an interesting connection with the Scots Guards. There's a man named John Moon who is with the Colonial Williamsburg Fifes and Drums, and he was brought over. I believe the story is that he worked for Potter, and he was with Potter out of Aldershot, and came over to New York to sell drums somewhere in the 1960s. And he had the title. I have to still see if this is 100% true, and maybe you can help. That he was the personal drummer for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And in the Scots Guards, he had done all of these duties, and he has pictures of him in his Scots Guards kit, fully out at the age of 14 or 15 years old, as a drummer in the 1950s. So right after World War II. But now the gentleman is in his 80s now. But what is very interesting is he brought kind of a Scots Guards style of drumming and marching to the United States, really in the 1960s, early 70s, with this Colonial Williamsburg Fifes and Drums. So there is a guards presence in the United States when it comes to the fifes and drums. And I find that interesting because it's a very old tradition meeting a younger tradition, and now they've kind of made their own style and hybrid out of it. But I guess my question is, when you're in a Guards band today, I'm assuming that, you know, the musicians and the auditions are probably very extensive, but at some point, I know in the old Guard, we were trying to fill ranks, and we were just trying to get people to perform the duty. And so now the level is very different, with the level of professionalism, the level of musicianship. Is that something similar in the Guards bands?
It's changed a bit now, because initially the Guards bands would audition their own musicians. We put a you know, an advert in the Times or something like that, you know, flute player required, and people would apply. But then since the formation of the Royal Corps of Army Music, I mean, the Guards, they still recruit, but they still have to go through the Royal Corps of Army Music, and they audition them now, and they decide where they go. Whereas when I joined, I sort of firmly wanted to do my time within the Coldstream Guards. It's not such, they don't really do that anymore. I think they could probably do a maximum tour of 3, maybe 4 years, and then for their career development, they can be posted around. So it's I'm not really on point with it now, but it's very different to when I first joined the band in the 90s.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So do you find some of the histories being lost if people keep transferring it in and out of the bands? Do they learn the history, or?
I mean, you know, some of the guys, even some of them, they're not interested, and some people, you know, I've always been a bit of a geek, you know, that's Stu. I love that. I love the sort of historical side. Some people aren't interested, and some people just absolutely love it, you know. There's histories and traditions. I mean, there are some things in the Guards which just can't be taught. They just have to be gained through experience. You know, when I first did my first Queen's Birthday Parade, the troop and the colour, and you do the infamous sort of spin wheel. There's always an old sweat who grabs you by the scruff of the neck and shoves you where you should be, people just look lost, but you gain it through experiences. And I think you need to do a number of years to actually be comfortable of what you're doing, Guard mount at Buckingham Palace, you do quite a few of those, but Queen's Birthday Parades, you don't, just because of the nature of it. But traditions are passed on, I think. It's very important.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but I used to say to guys, you're duty bound to maintain the colours and customs and the traditions of those who've gone before you. It's your duty to do that. And when you leave, you've done your bit, and it's carrying on. Because if you don't, they're lost. And there's always a reason for something. It's never just made up, really. There's a reason. And I always found it very interesting finding out what that reason was,
Hey everyone, this is Mark Riley again. We want to share a great opportunity with you to get your business name out to our listeners. We are looking for individual episode and yearly sponsors for the Washington Tattoo Podcast. So if you love music, history, and want to support military veterans, please take this step with us and consider being a sponsor. For information on that, please email marketing@thewashingtontattoo.com.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you brought that up, because that's something to instill in today's young ones, is that you are a part of a story. No matter who you are or where you come from, you have a story. And I think that is one of the most gripping things that I recognized when I came over to the UK, I think the first time, and to look at how the history was captured, the records that were kept. My first time to the Tower of London was just mind-boggling to see the royal jewels from 1100, something crazy like this. This doesn't exist in the United States. Mm-hmm. So your mind is just kind of blown where the history and the depth and the traditions that are still kept inside the UK as a whole, but specifically in London, is really inspiring. And so after your duties with the Coldstreams and you decided to step away, almost having a perfect changing of the guard, let's say, almost, you decided to continue your service with the Tower. Now, what came along with that decision, and what was the process of moving to the Tower of London?
Well, the Tower of London is something I've wanted a job at for so long. If I go back to when I was in the reserves the first time, one of my other instruments is the Northumbrian Pipes. There's Northumbrian small pipes. They're an instrument which is indigenous to Northumbria, the northeast of England. And the Fusilier headquarters are here at the Tower. So I was the commanding officer's piper, and I used to come into the Tower and play at dinners. And I remember just walking through, the sort of up water lane in the dark, which is always quite interesting in the Tower, just thinking, wow, what would it be like to work here? So it was always at the back of my mind. And I just, over my sort of last 10 years in the Coldstream, I set to work trying to, make that ambition, that sort of dream real. So, and that's what I did. I eventually sort of left the band. There's a friend of mine who's a Yeoman Warder here called Sean Huggins, and he said, Darren, I don't think there's any jobs going to come up until December. So, I hung out, and then a job came up and I went for it, and after that process, I don't want to go through another job interview ever again.
I love it. I love it. So what are some of the duties? I'm sure there are things we can talk about. There's probably things we cannot talk about. So what are some of the things if you were to explain your duties at the Tower today, what would that be?
Well, I'll sort of start by explaining who we are. We're the traditional custodians of the Tower of London, and we can sort of justly claim to being the oldest uniformed group of men and women in the world who still carry out the duties on which we were originally formed. So our origins date from about the year 1100, when specialist sort of footmen were here to guard the Tower. That was increased to about 30 in the year 1326. And that's when we have the sort of records of the Ceremony of the Keys. It's the oldest, and you'd be glad to know, shortest military ceremony in the world. It's over 750 years old. And our duties were to watch and ward the buildings and the prisoners. And we still carry out that duty today. And even during COVID, when we were in lockdown, we still carried out the Ceremony of the Keys every night. So, yeah, it's a pretty old job, you know. And I'm convinced that some of my colleagues have been here since the year 1100, looking at them. Well, they're a good bunch, yeah. So so that's it, watching and warding. We used to be watching and warding the prisoners. But now we are on posts around the tower. We police the tower. And also we're the sort of custodians of the tower's history. And we tell the stories of the tower when we do tours in our own particular unique military style. I'll leave it there.
I've seen quite a few YouTube videos of the very, very unique characters that are telling the stories in the history of the tower.
Yeah.
I would imagine that that is highly encouraged.
Oh yeah. I mean, some people can do that, some people can't. You know, you have to stick to your own humor. But there's some real characters. Yeah.
Well, perfect. And Stu, we got to witness the Ceremony of the Keys a few years back after the Mountbatten Festival, and that was really special. And I just want to say thank you for organizing that. And I would imagine this was right around maybe when Darren was first getting there, I would think, right?
So this would have been around about, well, this was 2019, February time. But although, you know, I organised the Ceremony of the Keys, I definitely didn't organise the torrential downpour we had, because that was horrendous. It was pretty bad.
I felt properly dressed, though. I had my rain slicker on with my hood and everything else on top of my suit jacket, but I felt horrible for Fabian, who was coming with us from Switzerland and only had his proper suit jacket on. It was soaked to the bone.
You know,
and couldn't go anywhere. Was there.
No, we obviously you hang around before you go in, and it was chucking it down then. And then obviously by the time you go in, you wait for it to happen, and then obviously you go through and watch the full ceremony. By the end of it, he was just like a drowned rat. You couldn't actually get any wetter, and you know, it got to the point where, not for him but for us, it was really comical.
Oh man, yeah, rain, sunshine, it goes ahead no matter what. Yeah, there's nothing going to stop it.
Yeah.
That's what I say. Thankfully, it's the shortest military ceremony in the world.
I felt I was properly welcomed into London weather, so I felt I got a taste of the real thing. So a question about some instrument repairing. So as a individual who has worked on instruments, have you had the luxury or challenge of working with some of the historical?
Sorry, I lost you there. The connection's going. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry about that. Did you ever have the opportunity or chance to work on any of the historical instruments?
Oh yes, I did. You know, which is what I really enjoyed doing. So, some very old sort of flutes from the 1850s, 1867s, even earlier than that. And the beauty about them being made out of wood and silver, when you can restore them back to their sort of, you know, original sort of condition, it's so rewarding. You know, to bring the grain, you know, to bring the grain of the wood back to life and to get the silver cleaned up and to get it working. Yeah, I really enjoyed that when I got them. It was more interesting than just sort of maybe servicing or overhauling, you know, modern concert flutes, which was nice, you know. But yeah, I would have quite happily carried on if it was sort of restoring those old instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting, because I think a lot of us, when we start to do some of the technical work of each of the jobs that we're in, we kind of learn this love for the technical side. But then there's only a few people that I've seen over the years that can be very good at the technical side, but they still give themselves the opportunity to lift above and look at the bigger picture of what that technical duty is inside of something much larger. And I think when you hear of your career and your story, and from the Northumbrian Pipes to an instrument repairer to playing the flute and all of these guards units, I mean, you've built this kind of career with different points of capital where you've done different things throughout your career. And I know when kids are getting involved with music at the very early stages, it's always a very hard challenge to, number one, like we said, to find the determination to practice, to do one thing and do it really well. But over a career, you have to do many things very well to really become successful. And I think when I start to think about young ones and looking to inspire them to get better, you're a person, Stu is a person, obviously, you know, folks like Mel Jameson and them are very big in my mind of how you look at their lives and you look at their career paths, and it wasn't just one thing that was able to bring them success. It was multiple things. And so if you were to tell a young one today, or a budding musician, something to inspire them or keep them motivated, what would be some advice that you would give a young musician?
Well, firstly, if they have that passion and that love, it's going somewhere to have that fed. You know, we talk about you know, going for lessons and practicing and the rudiments and things like that. But there's nothing better than sitting in a band and making music with people around you. That's the reason you do it. In my eyes, that's the inspiration, you know. And you get, you know, if you join a good band and you have a good conductor, they will remind you and inspire you and egg you on, and they keep on, they will, it just helps you know why you picked the instrument up in the first place and put all those hours in, you know. For me, what really spurred me on was just playing with military bands. Making music with people was just amazing, and going away to different places, and it opened up so many opportunities as well. I traveled to places which I never would have dreamt to, you know, and this was even as a reservist, you know, as a 15-year-old boy, 16-year-old boy, going away with a Fusiliers band, you know, was just amazing. And I learned so much. Yeah. I said, join a band. That was my inspiration. And things will just open up.
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, Stu, I mean, that was something you and I chatted about as well, was the ability to travel. And all three of us shared the same football pitch in Sydney, Australia together.
Yeah.
And I mean, Darren, which band were you with at that point?
Oh, the Coldstream Guards.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I am putting all of my stories together because at that point, I really wasn't so aware of all of the different styles of groups and the different histories behind the Guards bands. And so when I put these all together, it really is mind-boggling to think about the history in one place at one time, all making music together during a finale.
Yeah. So the strange thing about the Sydney Tattoo, there was another member of the Fusiliers who used to be in the band with us, who was she in the Highland band or the Lowland band?
Were they called Royal Regiment of Scotland then, or something?
Royal Regiment of Scotland. So
yeah.
She was out there with us as well. So three, you know, former Fusiliers were on the same stage, you know, tens of thousands of miles away. I mean, it's incredible. So that band has got that regiment has got a lot to answer for, actually. Yeah. In a very, very positive way, actually, because if I may mention, the former senior drum major, Household Division, Scott Fitzgerald, well, he was a junior drummer in the Fusiliers,
You know, and there was a number of us. It didn't work out too bad in the end, did it?
Scott joined at 15 as well. He joined the same time as me, and it was my dad found a loophole again to allow junior drummers in at 15. So as soon as he found this little loophole, that was it. He put ads in all the free newspapers, and I think he had something about 8 people join in, and some of them went, you know, spent a good 6 or 7 years in the Fusiliers, and then went on into the regulars and had some amazing careers.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So I have a novice question, and please entertain me or decide to laugh at me with this one. But so you have the changing of the guard, you have the trooping of the color, and you have the beating of retreat, which I think are 3 major events that happen with the military bands in London. Could you describe kind of the difference between the 3 of those?
Well, the changing of the guard is what it says on the tin, really. The band take the new guard to Buckingham Palace. They change over with the old guard, and then the band bring the old guard back. So we act as a bit of a musical taxi, I would say. I can describe it like that. That's that in a nutshell. The Queen's birthday parade, the treatment of the colour. You know, I think it's the first time that they ever really did that was during the reign of Queen Victoria. And it was when the regiment would parade the colours through the ranks before battle, so the troops knew what it looked like, so they could rally around it. You know, and it became a musical occasion. It's probably I think probably one of the greatest scenes of music, pageantry, pomp and ceremony in the world. It's you know, being on the outside of it, I was fortunate enough to do about 22 of them. And sorry, on the inside, and being on the outside of it, you know, it's just absolutely fabulous to watch. Beating retreats, again, that's I mean, I'll put you over to Stuart for that one, because the Marines love beating retreat.
Yeah, so I mean, the beating retreat, it stemmed from the tattoo type of thing, you know, where the drummers are going and you basically tell them to turn off the taps, and over the course of time, it built into a bigger spectacle, is probably the better word. But you know, the Royal Marines go on the Horse Guards Parade, and it's not changed. You know, they've still got to play certain types of music, certain ones, and it's not changed for years. They'll embellish it with some new marches and what have you, where the Guards have sort of changed it into a bit more of a spectacular and made it into a show. It's floodlit, there's pyrotechnics. It's more of it's like a West End show on Horse Guards Parade now. It's completely changed. So there's a big difference between the Royal Marines who you know stick very traditional and it's not changing and that's what it is. And the Guards have pushed that into a bigger show. And we have it round about the same time because all the seating's still up from Trooping the Colour. So there's basically a few weeks apart, which is why we have it the same time as the Guards as well. But yeah, they've expanded it into something a lot more. And it's, you know, when you've got that many tourists in London, that, you know, you need to make a show. And it's something for them to see and something they'll probably come back for as well if it's something a bit spectacular. Would you agree, Alan? Darren?
Yeah, we had to evolve a bit more because of the demographic and what they wanted. There are still traditional, you know, aspects within it, but you know, Stuart's right. It's more of a sort of military music spectacular. Now we sort of had to go sort of break off slight. We still do this. There are retreat elements, but we had to sort of go towards a more even tattoo type sort of format, you know, even the finale sequence that you have at Edinburgh Tattoo or Basel, you know, it's very simple, same sort of format, but it was just to bring the people in, you know, because we do it over 2 nights. Yeah, and I quite like it actually. So, you know, I mean, when you think about Trooping the Colour, incredibly traditional. Changing the Guard at Buckingham Palace and James's Palace or Windsor Castle, very, very traditional. And the beaten retreat is just something it's a bit more different now. Yeah.
Incredible. So I'm going to kind of wrap up a few questions here, but one of them I have, do you have a favorite musical memory or a few favorite musical memories from your career?
Oh, Right, there's a few, and some of them. One of them, which is probably going to strike home with the US audiences who will listen to this. I'll get back to that in a minute. The 100th birthday of the Queen Mother. I played Happy Birthday for her on her 100th birthday. That was a fabulous thing to do. Playing FA Cup final, Newcastle and Arsenal at the old Wembley Stadium. We did get beat 2-0, but the surround sound in the stadium, people singing, I'll never, ever forget that. My last Queen's Birthday Parade, Troop in the Colour. That was particularly important to me because I was the musical architect of that parade. So I put together the format as in the music for selection. I wrote the programme notes for the BBC and the programme notes for that. That was pretty important. But one thing I will talk about was the guard mount that I was present at Buckingham Palace, which was a few days following the Twin Towers being hit in New York. Now, I was on parade and we changed the format of that parade. So we played your national anthem, Star Spangled Banner, and it's the first time that the format of the parade had ever been changed to pay tribute for the fallen who lost their lives a few days before. And that is something that it's not a I can't say a favorite memory. I wouldn't use that words, but it's something that certainly had an impact on me out of the thousands that I'd done. That was quite a unique moment. Yeah.
Amazing. It's interesting when you hear these traditions and the unique times when they change, because the same thing at the White House, when we perform the troop step in front of the president and the dignitary, we always end with Yankee Doodle, except for one. When Queen Elizabeth II comes to visit Washington, we do not play Yankee Doodle. We always play British Grenadiers. So it's unique. Yeah, it's definitely unique. But I think those are the special moments where you say this ceremony never changes except.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think the tipping of the hat to our host nations is something very, very important. I think that also happens when you're at the world level and everyone is watching and you can see these two massively important countries in agreement, working together, even through the musical selections being played. I think that says a lot to just the power of what music can do, bringing countries and societies together.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's well named the universal language. It's something that we all have in common. It's absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely. So we have 4 final questions, and I think we had laughed about a few of these at first, but we'll go ahead and see what we've got, okay? The 4 final questions are, we have your favorite musical memory, which was the first one. And the second, we talked about books, if you have any favorite books. So do you have any favorite books?
I don't really know. The sad thing is, Mark, the majority of the books I'm reading about these days are people being beheaded in the Tower of London, so I can't really comment about that. I do have a really a favorite book actually, which I was involved with, and it's the history of the band of the Coldstream Guards. It's from 1685 to 2017, and I do love reading that book. It's sort of one of my coffee table books. But going back to childhood, I love the Chronicles of Narnia, things like that. Sebastian Falk's Bird Song, Marion Zimmer Bradley's Mists of Avalon. I can't really tell you. I love books, but I don't have one particular huge favorite, so I apologize for not giving you a strong answer.
Well, and I love these conversations because everyone gets to see a little inside knowledge of where someone's brain is. And there was a book I read a handful of years ago called Recapturing the Wonder. And it was talking about having the mind of a child to always be explorative and always trying to learn new things. And I just, even hearing you talk about the Chronicles of Narnia and these books, when we're kids, we read those kind of fictional books, but the excitement and the wonder is kind of there about what if. And I see that every day in my job, where you have kind of these two mentalities. And I'll steal a quote from my good friend Jeb Haig, who says, two types of people in the world: the what if folks and the this is folks. And when you start to look at things in that perspective, you kind of see how a lot of people walk into situations going, this is what this is, or this is what it can be. And I think, hearing your story, and even you bringing up the Chronicles of Narnia and these books as a child, I'm sure they molded and shaped your kind of thought process of how you look at the world.
Yeah. Well, musicians, we're creative, aren't we? We like to be creative. We have to, we have to use our experiences in music. I always say, your musical instrument is an extension of your emotions. You can't play a love song angry.
Yeah.
And you can't play something angry when you're really, really happy. You have to use those experiences to portray them through your instrument in your craft, don't you? Yeah.
100%. 100%. Do you have any hobbies?
Well, at the moment, I'm still sort of getting to grips with my job, but I did used to do a lot of sailing. I do enjoy sailing, as in sailing yachts. So I usually go sailing on the south coast when I can, but I do a lot of walking. I take the kids out, I love going up to the Lake District, English lakes, and climbing hills and trying to get up the odd mountain. But obviously that's been put on hold, for obvious reasons. But, the world's starting to spin a little bit quicker again. So hopefully I'll get back to that. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. And then last but not least, where could people find out more about you or the Tower or any of the groups that you've talked about today? Where could people find more information about you or those groups?
Well, the Tower of London, we come under the umbrella of a charity called Historic Royal Palaces. So if you just Google in Historic Royal Palaces at Tower of London, you should go straight through to that site. It's world famous, the Tower of London, so most people know it. Except when you try and get deliveries in this place and people can't find it, as I've discovered. I had a nightmare trying to get a sofa delivered once, and they couldn't find a castle in the middle of the city, but never mind.
I love it. I love it. Stu, do you have any final questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got one for Darren, just to put him on the spot a little bit. What's your favourite fact about the Tower of London?
The favourite fact about the Tower? Oh. Yeah. Wow.
Or is there a question you constantly get asked by the tourists?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to know the most common question from the tourists? Well, there's two. Can I give you two of the most common questions? Okay. One is, why are you called beef eaters? The other one is, where are the toilets? Now, I can tell you where all the toilets are within the Tower of London, but I cannot tell you why we're called beef eaters. We haven't got a clue. There's nothing written down to say why. Yeah. Facts are the same. I mean, it's kings and queens lived here for over 500 years. Oh, here's an interesting fact for you. Our first prisoner was in the year 1100. Yeah, our first ever prisoner, and he escaped in 1101. So for years after that, we had 100% escape record. Yeah, and he was a guy called Ranulph de Flambard, and he was the Bishop of Durham up in the northeast of England, Stu. So there you are. That tells you.
Right.
I love it. So, I mean, honestly, the beef eater, and then you have gin named after you and everything else. It seems to be very confusing.
Well, we get it from Beefeater Gin, who we're very fond of. We get a bottle on our birthdays. We get a bottle, and we usually get a bottle at Christmas, So getting gin's not a problem here, Mark. It's quite good,
Perks of the job.
Yeah. You've got to be so.
Yeah. Perks of the job, absolutely. Well, awesome. Darren, I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you've done to continue the traditions of the music that you've started, the groups that you've played in. Your story is inspiring. And honestly, to call you a friend is humbling for me. because we are part of this very unique niche and brotherhood of military musicians serving their country and then maintaining the history and traditions of the specific groups, and then trying to take that history and bring it to the 21st century audience. So I think that's very special. I tip my hat to you. I salute you for that. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with us.
Well, thank you so much for asking me, Mark. It's been a real pleasure, and it's really nice to see you again. It's been a while, yeah. And certainly next time you come over to Blighty, come over the pond to this country again, you must come and see us at the tower. Yeah, you must do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Stuart's already been here a few times, so he knows the score.
I'll see you in a couple of months anyway, so.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And that will do it for this episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast.
Well, that was a great interview from Darren. I really enjoyed it, Mark. I'm not too sure about you. I think what's really interesting is, for those that don't really know, I know Darren touched on the Northumbrian small pipes a little bit, but for those who don't know, it's inflated differently to a bagpipe. So where a bagpipe, you blow down the tube and goes into the bag, and then you press it with your arm to generate the air. These are done through bellows. So you've got a bag under one arm and a bellow under the other. You've got to pump the bellow up, which then puts the air into the bag, and then you've got to. So it's a bit, especially when you see the guys marching as well, the bit sort of waddling type of thing. But no, it's a great interview with Darren. I really enjoyed it. What about yourself?
Yeah, it was interesting because I didn't know, honestly, you could march with those either. I mean, I can think of people sitting there playing maybe in a session in the corner of a pub, but marching with it was got to look very unique.
There's a great video from the 1998 Edinburgh Military Tattoo with Darren on the finale marching with them. So you'll get a full gist of what it is, how hard it is to march while moving both arms at the same time. But it's a great video if anybody wants to go and check out the finale for that tattoo.
Perfect. No, it's amazing. We were kind of chatting about this too. I mean, just his love of history and what he does in the tower. And I mean, what an incredible idea is to maybe have him back on the podcast to talk specifically about living in that location and kind of what maybe the day-to-day is. But I mean, also thinking about all of the other folks that we have connections with that do that same exact kind of living somewhere historic as a musician. What are the duties that they have? The folks, kind of at the Vatican, obviously the folks at the White House, folks at Buckingham Palace. But I think it's a very interesting way to look at history through the eyes of musicians. So maybe we'll have to have him back on.
I mean, there's lots of musicians dotted all over the world who play at these historic palaces. The Queen's got her own piper who comes and pipes every morning. So to get some of these people who we wouldn't normally talk to, or nobody even knows that even exists, that's what their role is. It'd be fantastic to get on the podcast and just talk through what their role is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, excellent. So folks, hope you really enjoyed this episode of the podcast, and please look out for new ones coming probably in the next few weeks. So from Stu and I, have a great afternoon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Riley again from the Washington Tattoo. We have some exciting events planned for 2022, and we can't wait to share them with you. The first of which is our first annual gala on April 4th. This event will feature fine wine, world-class music, guest speakers, and an amazing venue, the Winery at Bull Run. We will also have special events, silent auction items, raffle items, and a VIP experience that will blow you away. If you're interested in being part of a sponsorship program or would like to donate items for our silent auction, please reach out to Edward Krizik at the Washington Tattoo. That's Edward_Krizik at the Washington Tattoo. EDWARD_KRZYSIK at the Washington Tattoo.